can come home now.
You said
Charlie, you gave your life for her. Come home.
But what about Anne-Marie?
Say goodbye, Charlie.
I haven't spent much time talking about them on this channel so far, but I tend to like a lot of art house Oscar type movies. I have a reputation among the people who personally know me as the movie guy who's actually smart and stuff. Hashtag humble brag. So it may surprise you to learn that my personal favorite movie of all time is the 1989 animated movie All Dogs Go to Heaven. If you haven't heard of it, that's fine. It's not the most well-known film ever, but it holds a special place in my heart. Mostly because since when I saw it when I was little, it basically solely inspired me to be a good person, as cringy as that sounds. I wouldn't call it a perfect movie, but I always enjoy revisiting it now and again, and the ending never fails to make me tear up just a little bit.
Charlie, will I ever see you again?
Sure. Sure you will, kid. You know, goodbyes aren't forever.
I've since enjoyed the entire franchise. The cartoon series in particular is pretty underrated.
They ransacked my place, and here I am with a cat's collar. It didn't add up.
Did you carry the two?
Hey, stay out of my voiceovers.
So, considering that I have a tendency to agree with critics, it may surprise you that despite this being my favorite movie of all time, it still has a rotten rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And you know what? I'm totally okay with that. So, look, I love movies, if that wasn't obvious. Now, I've always had a great respect for film critics. Film critics quite literally got me into movies in the first place. So for the past 10 years or so, I've seen time and again people on YouTube and other social media platforms freak out over just how much they hate movie critics and how irrelevant critics are, etc., etc. This has always annoyed me. But it's with the release of the Mario movie that I felt I finally had enough. So in this video, I'm not trying to argue that whatever opinion you have on a particular movie is wrong and you must side with the critics. However, I do feel that the opinions of critics need to be understood and validated if we are to keep any sense of moral sanity in the realm of film critique and film criticism. Because I'm afraid if we keep headed down this road of modern movie critics are always wrong, it'll mean the death of proper film critique, and nobody wants that. So, first of all, time and again, these videos will pop up saying, how could critics hate this? Or, critics liked this movie? I'm never trusting critics again. It's kind of funny that whenever audiences do agree with critics on a movie, suddenly everyone just shuts up. But if there's one divide, everyone's acting like critics are the Antichrist. No, a few critics giving Mario a bad review is not a sign of the end times. So let's break down all the dumb arguments I've heard made in an attempt to destroy the credibility of film critics, starting with my favorite. The conspiracy theory. Sure, no one calls it a conspiracy theory, but it's a conspiracy theory. The idea behind it is that a film studio secretly knows that their movie is bad, but they're worried that the bad critic reviews are going to ruin the movie's box office success. So they'll bribe critics into giving the movie a good review. Or sometimes a studio will bribe critics to trash a movie from a rival studio, though this one gets passed around less often. Usually the red pill crowd throws around this conspiracy theory because I guess a movie starring non-straight white dudes being good goes against the laws of physics or whatever, but I just as often see this thrown around with normal folks as well. I began to see this theory after critics trashed Batman v Superman, though it really took off when critics dared to like The Last Jedi. Now, look, if you meet anyone who legitimately believes that critics can be paid off, that's a giant red flag that they have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys in on a secret. It's pretty shocking, so you might want to sit down for this. Studios don't actually care that much about critic reviews. Shocker, I know. Or at least, they don't care enough to want to go out there and bribe critics. Because aside from bribery being, illegal, it's also financially risky and frankly ineffective. So I'm gonna blow this conspiracy theory out of the water and explain thoroughly why, no, critics are not paid off by studios. So first of all, do you know how many critics there are out there? So I couldn't find an exact number, but if we look at the average number of critics who reviewed what I would say are the biggest movies of 2023 so far, so Mario, Dungeons & Dragons, John Wick, Megan, and Ant-Man, there's an average of about 311 critics who review movies, or at least the big blockbuster movies, which are the exact movies being accused of bribing critics. So according to the law, and bribery is against the law, y'all, a commercial bribery involves bribes exceeding more than $1,000. Commercial bribery is illegal in many states, including California, by the way. So, if we are to assume that studios are willing to pay, let's say, $999 to avoid hitting that 1,000 mark to bribe on an average of 311 critics, that means that studios will have to pay an average of $310,689 in briberies for each movie. So if we look at, say, Disney, who is often a target of conspiracy theory claims, Disney is releasing 14 movies in 2023. Assuming that Disney is bribing critics on each movie and paying that average of $310,000 per movie, that would mean that Disney is paying $4,349,646 in bribes for their movies. And we didn't even get to television. So with the 13 new shows along with The Mandalorian and Loki, that brings our total to 29 releases in 2023. So 310,689 times 29.
Did you carry the two?
That comes out to an average of $9,009,981 paid by the Disney company per year in bribes alone.
I am just a dumb bunny, but we are good at multiplying.
I know that this is Disney we're talking about, but $10 million just to bribe critics, along with the regular expenses of production and marketing. So yeah, the first problem you got is that bribery is expensive, especially when you gotta fish out $10 million every single year. But then you got the problem that if critics are being bribed, it's clearly not working. First of all, you have to explain that despite critics supposedly being bribed, the tomato meter score changes with each given film. So is Disney bribing different critics then? Not to mention that just because critics liked one movie in a franchise doesn't mean they'll like them all. Soren Anderson of the Seattle Times gave The Last Jedi a rating of 3.5 out of 4. Bribed, you say? Not so fast, because then he gave Solo, a film in the same franchise released just 1 year later, a rating of 2 out of 4. I guess Disney just forgot his paycheck on that one? But then you have to remember that we're not just bribing 1 or 2 critics, but hundreds. Remember, an average of 311 critics per movie. You gotta trust that not one single critic is gonna be a whistleblower and report studios for bribing critics. Because, surprise, surprise, having a job where you get to tell people your honest-to-God opinion on movies and get paid for it isn't exactly the worst job in the world. But along with this, studios might not exactly get the box office success, because getting critical acclaim doesn't guarantee box office success, and being critically panned doesn't mean your movie is destined to flop. There have been many movies in the past that have been universally acclaimed by critics but flopped at the box office. And many movies that were just destroyed by critics that ended up being one of the highest grossing movies of that year. This is what I mean when I say that generally speaking, studios don't actually care very much if their movies get good reviews or not. Sure, good reviews are nice, they help with marketing, but good reviews aren't a guarantee of success and bad reviews aren't a death sentence. If movies get critically panned, there are ways I've seen the marketing team work around it. Maybe you focus on the few positive reviews that you can find and emphasize those. Or if your movie has a high audience score, focus on the audience score in reviews. If a movie is making bank, call it the #1 movie in the world. What I'm saying is that even if the movie gets bad reviews, there are ways to work around it that aren't nearly so expensive and risky. Also, can I just say that I've never seen any hard evidence for this? The only evidence that ever gets presented is some dude on a forum saying, well, I saw the movie and I thought it was bad. Like, yeah, dude, you gotta try harder than that for me to believe you. And okay, as if this all wasn't enough, here's the final nail in the coffin. What's gonna destroy this conspiracy theory once and for all. Let's say a studio has a movie that is bad, and they know it's bad, and they, for whatever reason, are genuinely worried that the bad reviews are going to ruin the movie's chances at the box office. You could pay off critics, a move that is financially and legally risky without much evidence that good reviews lead to good box office revenue, or you could, just not screen the movie for critics. Yeah, that's right. You're not required to screen movies for critics. Sure, most studios do in the hopes of getting good reviews to help with marketing, but it's not required. In fact, if you ever see a movie released without a rating on Rotten Tomatoes, that means the studio didn't screen the movie ahead of time. So, do you think the studio is going to choose the legal, expensive, and ineffective option, or the legal and cheap option? So, no more whining about how film critics are paid off. The red pill crowd just loves throwing this one around. You'll usually see this argument with the anti-woke crowd, that critics hated a movie because it wasn't woke enough. Look, ignoring the offensive strategy of politicizing diversity, in turn politicizing the existence of minorities within pop culture, critics don't really care about diversity one way or another. Like, diversity didn't stop critics from hating on Eternals. Even if praise is handed out for representation, it's usually separate from the actual review. Yes, read the whole review. Turns out critics praise stuff like, writing and directing too. And critics tend not to really care whether movies lean liberal or conservative. Sure, there have been tons of acclaimed films with liberal values, but there have been just as many acclaimed conservative films as well. Look at Top Gun Maverick, quite possibly one of the most politically conservative films released in the past several years, sitting with a comfortable 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. Turns out critics don't really care one way or another as long as it's, good. So, this is a fun one as basically a last-ditch effort. They just didn't get the movie. As someone who has personally written movie reviews in the past, can I just say that if anyone who read my review told me that I didn't get the movie, I would probably respond with, oh, I got the movie, I just thought the movie sucked. Because it turns out that being a critic takes more than just sitting around and watching movies all day. Most professional critics, at least critics who work for big publications and are listed under top critics on Rotten Tomatoes, have to have at least a bachelor's degree. This includes not only having studied journalism, but also aspects of film as well. This means subjects such as film history, analysis, as well as technical aspects such as screenwriting or cinematography. Obviously, critics then pour that knowledge into their reviews. If you actually bother to read critic reviews, and yes, you can read the reviews contributed on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll find that critics are often knowledgeable and will notice things that regular audiences might miss. It doesn't mean you have to agree with critics, but they know what they're talking about. See, if I go out there tomorrow and say that Top Gun or Avatar was acclaimed by critics, nobody panics because it's all part of the plan. But if I say that one small kids movie that audiences love was critically panned, everyone loses their minds. It's this hypocrisy that I honestly really hate. Whenever there's a movie like Super Mario Brothers that critics hate and audiences love, people everywhere freak out and act like critics are crazy and have lost all credibility. But when critics and audiences do agree, those same people are strangely quiet. The reason people pretend to hate critics, I think, is the same reason I think people pretend to hate the Oscars. I think people view critics as authority figures in entertainment. So when critics hate something audiences love, I think some audiences feel insecure. Like, do I have bad taste? Did I like something that actually sucks? Of course, I can't get inside everyone's head and find out what they're actually thinking, but it definitely comes across that way online. So the real problem I have with all this is that it essentially invalidates people's genuine opinions. No one is forcing you to agree with critics, because the universal truth about film is, and say it with me, kids, I could, and probably one day will, make a whole video explaining why film, like all art, cannot be judged for its quality objectively. Anyone who says otherwise is simply trying to invalidate the opinions of people they disagree with. The truth is that no one agrees with everyone on movies. You think critics agree with each other?
Because he wants to set you up. He's a director, and he wants to play you like all the directors, the great directors want to do. He wants to play you like a piano, which is have you smile and then swing you right into some depression.
Yeah, well, the next time
I think
that
he got
somebody
you.
wants to play me like a piano, he'd better get some music that's worth listening to.
You guys realize that most critics actually liked the Mario movie, right? 50 to 59% basically means a 50-50 split between positive reviews and negative reviews. You guys think Academy members agree with the nominees and winners? Of course they don't.
Is there something about Green Book that offends you? This is what I'm trying to get to.
Offend? Are you British?
Yeah.
Are you British?
I am.
Let me give you a British answer. It was my cup of tea.
Even I don't agree with critics 100% of the time. Sure, I usually do. Most of the time, when critics love a movie, I tend to love it as well. Meanwhile, I can't remember how many times I saw a movie audiences raved about where I was just like,
wow, this is garbage. You actually like this?
But that's not universal. For example, most critics panned Don't Worry Darling. Here's the thing, I actually really liked Don't Worry Darling. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but I personally thought it was far from bad or even okay. Not only did I really enjoy it, but I probably would have gone to see it a second time if I wasn't so busy. On the flip side, critics universally praised the Amazon limited series Small Axe. In particular, the second film, Lovers Rock, was singled out by most critics as being the best of the 5 films, with one movie YouTube channel I follow even naming it the best movie of 2020. Here's the thing, while I loved most of Small Axe, I actually kinda hated Lovers Rock. I honestly wasn't very impressed by it. I was impressed by the other 4 films, but not Lovers Rock. But here's the thing, I'm not sitting here complaining about it. I'm not sitting here saying that critics are liars who clearly have no idea how to judge a good movie just because they didn't like Don't Worry Darling. I'm not claiming that Steve McQueen paid off critics to praise Lovers Rock, or that they only loved it for political reasons. Because, unlike some people, I understand universal truth about film. While critics might have more experience studying film and are generally more educated on film, at the end of the day, critic reviews are just opinions. They're usually well-versed, educated, and well-argued opinions, but they're still just opinions. And even if you don't personally agree with the opinions of critics, that doesn't mean that they or you are stupid. It just means you guys disagree, and that's okay. The problem with complaining endlessly about this stuff is that these people are attempting to silence and validate anyone who disagrees with them. You're not allowed to think the Mario movie is bad. You're not allowed to think The Last Jedi is good. I think so many people are so insecure about their movie opinions that they force themselves to believe that their opinions are the popular opinions. Anyone who disagrees with them is dumb or out of touch. If I'm being honest, doesn't this sound a little immature? Because, yeah, I didn't like the Mario movie. I thought it was bad, and I still stand by my initial review of the film. But when I see that other people liked it, I simply just go, okay, and move on with my life. To stay fixated on this is frankly immature, and to go out of your way to make hour-long videos trying to tell people that critics you disagree with are dumb or have an agenda just invalidates people's genuine opinions and creates a film culture where you're not allowed to go against whatever audiences decree the popular opinion is. If you take away anything from this video, I want it to be this. It's okay for people to disagree with you. It doesn't mean that either of you are dumb. It doesn't mean that either of you have an agenda. It just means you're both human. People will sometimes disagree with you. That's okay.